US President Donald Trump, the global trade war just got more personal. In a sharp escalation, US President Donald Trump has warned that tariffs on Indian goods could be hiked significantly within the next 24 hours. This is what he said yesterday. That window comes to an end tonight. Now, this move seems tied directly to New Delhi's continued purchase of Russian crude. Now, in an interview to CNBC International's Squawk Trump said that India is not a good trading partner and that he would be raising tariffs on India in 24 hours. Now, currently, remember, Indian goods face a 25% tariff in the United States. Now, these tariffs were to be effective August 7th, but Trump's latest tirade against India could see the number change upwards, and it's not still known if there would be another change in the tariff deadline. Trump also said that India has not been a good trading partner because India does business with the United States, but US doesn't do business with India owing to India's trade barriers. He also added that India has the highest tariffs of anybody. Remember, Trump's latest remarks come just a day after Trump shared a message on his Truth Social platform saying that India is not only buying massive amounts of Russian oil and is selling it in the open market for big profits. Now, going on to say that India was responsible for funding Russia's war in Ukraine. Donald Trump's administration has also said in the past week that India's purchase of Russian crude oil has emerged as an irritant in the trade talk deals. Now, India, meanwhile, is calling out the double standards, arguing that it needs affordable oil to fuel its growing economy and pointing out that the West itself hasn't stopped doing business with Moscow. The Ministry of External Affairs in India had responded to US threats of higher tariffs on Monday by saying that while India has received criticism from the US and European Union about Russian oil purchases, these decisions were necessitated by the diversion of regular supplies to Europe during the crisis and were also encouraged by the then US administration under former President Joe Biden. Now, regarding the criticism, India has made it clear that its energy procurement strategy focuses on ensuring affordable and stable supplies for its population, particularly given the current global market conditions. India has also pointed out that the nations criticizing these purchases are, in fact, themselves indulging and engaging in Russian trade. The response emphasized that targeting India in this context lacks justification as well as logic. Now, pressed on whether US itself is still importing Russian oil, Russian uranium, Trump dismissed the question saying, and I quote, "I know nothing about that," and instead blamed the entire conflict on Biden's war. Let's listen in to what Donald Trump said.
President,
Thank you.
India says that the U.S. imports Russian uranium, chemicals, fertilizers, while criticizing their energy imports. Your response to that, sir?
I don't know anything about it. I'd have to check, but we'll get back to you on that.
And that's a smug remark coming in from US President Donald Trump saying that he knows nothing about US importing materials, including uranium, from Russia. Meanwhile, Trump also went on to say that he will stop what he called Biden's war, referring to the Russia-Ukraine conflict, calling it the sixth war he will end, once again referring to his role in the India-Pakistan ceasefire in May this year, despite India's stand otherwise. Listen in.
This is Biden's war. This is not my war. I'm here to get us out of it. It's a mess, and I'm here to get us out. I haven't heard that when you say about 60-year-old men and, et cetera. But this is Biden's war, and we're working very hard to get us out. I stopped 5 wars in the last 5 months, actually, and I'd like this to be the 6th, frankly, and that doesn't even include Iran, with, obliterating their nuclear haul, because they would have had nuclear weapons within 2 months. But stopped a lot of wars. You just take a look at the ones just over the last 2 or 3 months. It's been amazing. This is the one I'm trying to stop. This is the one we're working hardest on. The other ones I stopped within a matter of days, almost every one of them, including India and Pakistan, and I could go over the whole list, but you know the list as well as I do. But this is the one we'd like to see. I haven't not heard that, but this is Biden's war. And it's a war that he got us into, or indirectly got us into. It should have never happened. It would have never happened had I been president.
Meanwhile, there's also bad news for the pharmaceutical industry, and not just India's pharma industry, but the world's. Trump has said that tariffs on pharma imports into the U.S. could be as high as 250%. He said he will initially impose a small tariff on pharmaceuticals, but then in 1 year to a year and a half maximum, he will raise that rate to 150% and then 250%. Now remember, earlier in the year, just days after the April 2nd Liberation Day tariffs were announced, Trump had said that tariffs on the pharma sector could be higher than anyone has ever seen. With 250% now slapped, he seems to be living up to that promise. Remember, the US president has repeatedly threatened and then changed course on tariff threats. So there's no guarantee still that he will eventually set pharmaceutical tariffs at the 250% rate. Now, in early July this year, Trump had threatened 200% tariff on pharmaceuticals. Well, we have a special guest joining us this morning to put everything that we are hearing from President Donald Trump into perspective and what this means for India and the Indian economy. Teresa John, Deputy Head of Research and the lead economist at Nirmal Bang, joins me this morning. Teresa, good morning. Pleasure having you here with us. Straight off the bat, what are you making of this latest tariff tirade that US President Donald Trump is targeting towards India?
So the tariffs on India actually have been higher than anticipated because we've not been able to reach a trade deal. I think the Indian government also has been trying to protect the interests of this domestic electorate of the farmers, of the MSMEs.
Right.
We are to some extent at a disadvantage even compared to other economies because our tariffs 25% are now higher. It may not be a situation that sustains for an extremely long period of time. I think we will come to a solution, but in the near term, obviously, this is a disadvantage for India, and we could see the impact of that even on domestic growth. Our exporters will be impacted. So from a policy perspective, I think there will need to be some support, possibly from monetary policy today, and maybe even on fiscal policy, the government could give some incentive to exporters to kind of offset the impact of the tariffs.
Come to your views on the monetary policy in just a bit, but just staying specifically right now with what we are hearing from the US, Teresa. 25% tariff was news that was well digested, not just by markets, also by companies who were looking at potentially recalibrating their supply chains and really figuring out how to continue doing business with the US. But now Donald Trump saying that there could be additional penalty owing to the fact that India buys Russian oil, and also at the same time dismissing any knowledge of US itself engaging in any sort of trade ties with Russia. The entire narrative now seems to be becoming a little more personal, and his attacks on India only intensifying. Now, August 7th is literally for US less than 48 hours away. For India, of course, it's tomorrow, but given the fact that US is 12 hours behind India, it's still a few hours to go. We don't know whether there's going to be an extension to the dateline or not, but what we can anticipate surely is that the tariff rate will be much higher than 25%. What could be that tariff limit? Is there any sense, any numbers that you are plotting to just try and make sense of what are the scenarios that India could be confronted with?
I think one number that Donald Trump himself has said is a 100% penalty for non-tariff barriers. That could be an ad valorem rate. So it will not be 124%. It could be 100% on 24%. So it may not be as high as people are expecting it to be, but I think the key here is that India has not really, I think, succumbed to pressure from the US. The tariffs are a negotiating tactic as well as far as Trump is concerned. So he's obviously, upping the ante here. What could really happen is that India has actually already started purchasing more of US crude, and both our exports and imports to the US. So basically, our oil trade with the US has gone up. Before 2022, our imports from Russia were less than 1%. Today, we are at somewhere between 25 to 30%, give or take, depending on a monthly basis. We will be forced to diversify away. Do we completely stop trading with Russia? We may not have to. We may not go down that route, but clearly we will have to diversify away to other sources, other countries, and one of them could be the US. And I think the primary strategy of these tariff threat, and potentially they could be in place for some time as well, is to actually to get India to engage more with the US, both in terms of oil trade as well as probably even defense procurement.
All right, let's stick to oil for just a moment before we come specifically to pharmaceuticals. Now, on the oil trade that India has, in fact, not just India, even Brazil and China have with Russia, versus what we are hearing in OPEC of increased production capacity. In fact, almost 500,000 barrels last month, another 500,000 barrels of exceeded capacity this month. So OPEC Plus is also, in a way, rewiring its own supply chains and really expanding what it's offering to the world, perhaps in a bid or in anticipation that there could be some rebalancing when it comes to trade. But with crude at about $70 a barrel, slightly lower at about 68.5 last when I checked, how do you think, if there was a scenario that Russia is taken out of the equation when it comes to oil trade with the world, how do you think prices of global crude oil are likely to get impacted?
I'm personally not of the opinion that oil prices are going to go up substantially, even if some of the trade is diversified away from Russia. Because it's not just OPEC plus. Obviously, they are increasing production. They have stated that they'll be increasing production. Then there are members within OPEC and OPEC plus, which who also kind of, to some extent, flout their production targets as well. So to that extent, it's not just from there, but even U.S. production is going up. And we've seen that under the previous Trump administration as well. And global demand is not that high. I think the reason that prices have held up so far is because supply has been kept in check, even when demand has been muted. So supply is going to increase from other sources. Even if Russia is taken off the market, maybe you could see a slight increase in prices, but I don't think it's going to be a runaway increase in oil prices.
All right, so no shocks expected as far as oil prices, crude oil prices globally go. Meanwhile, coming back to the story on pharmaceuticals, remember, Donald Trump has announced that tariffs on pharma imports into the U.S. could go up over time to as high as 250%. Remember, he had earlier said that 200% is what could be a possible scenario on pharma tariffs. But now this figure of 250% is the latest that we are hearing on pharma exports into the U.S. Now, remember, India is one of the biggest suppliers of pharmaceutical products into the U.S. The trade, in fact, the export value of India's pharmaceutical exports to U.S. is as much as, give or take, about $9 billion plus, almost $10 billion per annum. Teresa John, I want to understand from you, if this 250% tariff on India's pharma exports was to be slapped, Trump is saying he'll start maybe lower, take it up to 150, then all the way up to 250%. 250% is a big number. Can U.S. afford that? Can U.S. consumers afford that? And more so for India, can India's pharmaceutical companies still remain competitive?
So you're right. Firstly, the U.S. consumer will not be able to afford these kind of tariffs. And Trump also wants to keep healthcare costs in check. So while the threat may be of a 250% tariff, I don't know whether that will actually pan out. Would tariffs on pharmaceuticals go up in the interim to some extent? I think it will. Like we've seen in other cases as well. So the overall the strategy here is to get pharmaceutical companies to set up production in the US. There are a few Indian companies which have production in the US, and increasingly more companies might start doing that. But if tariffs do actually go up to 250%, I think even the US consumer will not be able to handle it, and obviously the Indian companies will not be able to take the hit on their margins, because I don't think it'll be feasible to sell with tariffs as high as 250%.